6. The following morning I rang Peter. "Morning, Molly. How's tricks?" "Pretty good, thanks. And you?" "In peak condition." "Peter, can you just remind me, how much are those people offering for the farm?"
"The McDonald's? Asking price is agreed."
But I haven't agreed, have I? I mean, not absolutely." There was a pause.
"Well, I mean, you've accepted the offer."
"But isn't it more usual to get a few rival bids going?"
"Well, depends. It's certainly not terribly ethical to renege at this stage, Molly."
"Peter, I need more money. That's the thing. Much more." I felt a bit breathless.
I can't go and get a better offer now."
"No, right. Yes, I can see that."
And they're a lovely couple. They would be devastated."
"Well, quite. No, I do see. Paddy, then?"
"Paddy?"
"He wants the land."
"Yes."
Can you get more from him?" The line went silent.
"Paddy's buying it at market value."
"Which, as we know, is a snip. No wonder he's so excited, snooping around my fields, spying on my children. I think I can double it if I advertise it properly. Hasn't it got development potential?"
"Hardly. It's farmland, not industrial brownfield, thank goodness."
"I think we should look into it anyway. Maybe get some competition going. I can't just sell it off to the nearest neighbour, can I? I owe it to the children to get as much as possible for it."
"The children?"
"Yes, their inheritance." Golly, was I some Greek shipping heiress? "It's just, I might need to buy in London, Peter, that's all. And that's a pricey exercise, as we know." There was another pause. His voice, when it came, sounded weary, sad even.
"I'll see what I can do, Molly."
I felt crummy, obviously. I mean, really crummy. But not for long. Heavens, not for long, because this was business, wasn't it, for Pete's sake? I couldn't just give away my only asset, could I? David would be horrified. Actually, no. Don't think about David. Instead, I legged it upstairs, taking the stairs 2 at a time, which I can still do when I feel like it, and in the privacy of my own bedroom, logged on to Zoopla on my iPad to look at flats, whereupon an almighty row broke out downstairs. Wishing there was still a point at which all teenage children had to do a spell of national service, I dashed down to separate the warring parties. I found Minna pink with fury, cheeks wet with tears, shrieking at Nico, who lay prone and unconcerned on his sofa, eyes on the television. "What is the problem now?" I roared. "Nico has only ruined my entire life, that's what," she screamed, fists balled.
"Minna is employing ridiculous hyperbole as usual,"
said Nico, who liked to run verbal rings around his sister.
"I simply told Ted she wasn't home when he came to the door with his dick out, which," he flashed me a look, "and she's gone all shouty crackers."
"He lost his phone and he came to ask me to the pub and now he's probably going to take Gemma Parker," she sobbed. I sighed and perched on the arm of the sofa. "I think Nico's right, Minna," I said gently. "You do need to be a bit more unavailable, a bit less eager." A text vibrated in my pocket. I couldn't resist taking out my phone, but I didn't look at it. "If you play a bit harder to get, he'll be less interested in looking elsewhere."
"She needs to tell him where to go," muttered Nico.
"You know nothing about love," shouted Minna as I glanced at my text.
"So loved our day. Can we do it again? Next week? Felix."
I went hot. My heart leapt right out of my throat and bounced around the room, across the furniture, then popped back in again.
"Doesn't she, Mum?"
"What?" I whispered, glancing up, my face hot.
She needs to tell him where to go. You don't just jump if he says jump, Nico said forcefully. Guys don't like that.
Don't they? I said, unthinking, glancing at my phone again.
No, of course not, Mum. You need to be a bit mysterious. It's lesson 1. Don't make it too easy. Be unavailable, and then they'll start eating out of your hand.
My fingers had been itching to text back. Yes, I loved it too. How lovely. Any day at all. Ted will forget me if I do that, Minna gulped. And find someone else. And don't say, well, then he's not worth it. He is worth it.
Okay, I'll admit it's a bit of a gamble. He might just go and shag Gemma Parker. But trust me, Minna, he looked a bit disappointed when I said you were still clubbing in London with Lucy.
You didn't, we breathed in unison.
I did. He needed it. That shook him a bit. He muttered something about letting him know on Facebook when you were back.
Minna and I were silent. So what should I do? Tell him I'm back?
No. Get the next train to London and do some clubbing with Lucy and put pictures on Facebook and then come back.
She swallowed. I'm not sure he'll like that. He's quite possessive. I mean, sensitive.
Well, a lot of guys are. That's standard. But trust me, Minna, if you want to stand any chance, it's your only option.
I'll think about it, she muttered before slinking from the room.
Thanks, Nico, I breathed when she was out of earshot. My pleasure. He picked up the remote and changed channels and lay down again. Anything I can do for you, Mum? Any little creases that need ironing out in your life? I stood up quickly.
No, thank you.
Nico was remarkably perceptive, something I often forgot. He was surprisingly in touch with what the Daily Mail would be pleased to call his feminine side. Very much wanting to follow more basic instincts, I nonetheless steeled myself, went into the kitchen and sat down at my desk. I resisted texting Felix back for at least an hour. Then I went upstairs to sit quietly on my bed and reply. I wrote, I enjoyed it too. Can't do next week, I'm afraid, but possibly the following one? I pressed my knees together, shut my eyes tight, and crossed myself, and pressed send. A few seconds later, a text came back. Following week, I'm in Vienna. Shame. I shot up from the bed and paced around the room, appalled. I went cold. Then I felt dreadfully hot and sweaty, and before I could allow myself to think any further, sent back, Oh, hang on, just realized I have to come up on Tuesday to deliver something to Lucy. In a flash, he was back. Great. Let's have dinner Tuesday night. I'll be in touch nearer the time. I gazed at my phone as if it were a devotional icon, kissed it reverently, pressed it to my cheek, and then pocketed it guiltily. Not very smooth, not at all classy, but still, I had my date. Nico would strongly disapprove, I thought, cringing. But on the other hand, I thought as I sat down and looked at my reflection, which was flushed and bright-eyed, I didn't have all the time in the world, did I, as a middle-aged woman? Time was not on my side as it was on Minna's. Next door I could hear Minna packing to go to London and escape the object of her desires, whilst I, of course, was flinging myself at mine. No, I wasn't. Not flinging, just accommodating a busy man with a very demanding schedule, that's all. Any unfortunate juxtaposition with my teenage daughter's newfound restraint was purely coincidental. The following Tuesday, almost to assuage my own conscience, I cut it rather fine. Minna was, to her enormous credit, still in London with Lucy, and had asked for a bag of clothes to be brought up in case she stayed longer, which was encouraging. It also meant I had a genuine reason to go up to the flat and deposit her bag, and, of course, mine. I'd intended to arrive in the afternoon, But at the last minute a buyer suddenly materialized for Nutty, the iron grey gelding I'd bought at auction some time ago and failed to sell. And the woman was offering the asking price if she could see him today. Also, she was coming with a trailer, she told me, which was a frightfully good sign. Naturally, Mrs. Pritchard was late. 1 o'clock became 2 o'clock as I waited anxiously in the yard. Minna's and my bags were already stashed in the car, and although I was dressed in jeans and a t-shirt, I had smart London clothes laid out on the bed upstairs for a lightning change. The makeup was already in place, the hair blown dry courtesy of the local salon. I was all ready to catch the 3 o'clock train. She'd sounded so excited, Mrs. Pritchard, when she'd rung, thrilled to have found exactly what she wanted. The ad on HorseQuest reading so marvellously. "I hardly need to get on him," she'd gushed. "He sounds completely perfect." Please let her be quick. Let her buy the completely perfect horse in seconds flat so I could be on my way to London with £4,000 in my pocket. Half an hour later, a silver Range Rover swept through the gate into the yard, bearing not Mrs. Pritchard, but Mr. It wasn't ideal. Mr. Pritchard was a lean, bald, tight-lipped man wearing what looked like pre-Raj breeches. He had a clipped military manner that suggested he knew exactly what he was doing. Indeed, he told me, his wife didn't know what she was talking about, and that it was much better for him to buy a horse on her behalf, as she tended to get emotionally swayed. My heart sank deep into my boots, particularly when I led Nutty out and Pritchard felt his legs. "He's got a slight lesion on his left hind," he said, straightening up. "That's an ancient injury," I told him. "He's never lost the bump, but he's as sound as a bell. Trot him if you like." "Yes, please." Right. That meant I had to trot him up, which wasn't entirely in the script. I was rather hoping Pritchard would do it. It was another warm day and I'd get sweaty if I wasn't careful. I was careful. I trotted Nutty very, very slowly, jogging gently beside him, barely getting him out of a walk, and keeping my arms right away from my sides, like an ape. "Okay," he said doubtfully when I jogged back. "Although I wouldn't have minded an extended trot. Can I see him ridden?" This was a standard request, and one I was totally prepared for, but totally unprepared to carry out, since a riding hat on my freshly coiffed hair was out of the question. Well, you see, I can't find my son, and I'm afraid I don't ride anymore. So if you wouldn't mind just hopping on yourself," I beamed charmingly. "He's perfectly safe." "Very well. In the absence of a rider, I shall take him round the paddock myself. But I'll be back another day. Perhaps one of your daughters can ride him." Yes, another day, I said happily. "And tell you what, why don't you ride him then when they're back?" "Since I'm here, I'll ride him now," he said firmly. Plucking the saddle and bridle from the stable door, where I'd handily placed them, he tacked him up himself in seconds flat. Then, taking the reins, he sprang athletically into the saddle. Nutty's eyes flickered imperceptibly, but recognizing he had a pro on board, he immediately found his manners. In moments he was off. On the bit, neck arched, chin on chest, at a showy walk, through the open gate and into the paddock. Pritchard walked, then trotted endless circles and figures of 8, whilst I stood at the fence, glancing frantically at my watch, calling, "Lovely! That's probably enough, isn't it?" Whilst he totally ignored me. Instead, he barked orders as he passed at a canter now. "I'd like a small jump, please, a cavaletti." Or, "Could you put up a double?" All of which meant I had to dash around in the heat, putting up poles and crossbars while he hopped over them and adding tricky, colourful fillers to see if Nutty shied, which he didn't. It took so long, I thought I was going to be sick. Finally, I strode into the middle of the paddock and roared, "I think he's probably had enough now." Pritchard pulled up beside me, glared down. "Why, is he unfit?" No, but I have to catch a train. I'm going to London." "Oh, right. You should have said." He dismounted in one fluid movement. The truth, so simple. Why hadn't I lunged for it earlier? "He's a nice horse," he said, giving him a quick pat. "I'll come back and have another look." "Okay, goodbye," I breathed, snatching the reins from him. "Oh, right." He looked startled. "You are in a rush." "Yes, terrible rush," I said, swiftly unsaddling Nutty. Pulling him to the fence where I left the tack, yelling for Nico, I raced away with the sweaty horse beside me, running now, full pelt through the yard. I popped him smartly in his stable, yanked his bridle off, and flung it over the door. Mr. Pritchard followed slowly. I felt his eyes on my back as I dashed back to the house. As I glanced through the kitchen window, I saw him shrug and go towards his car. "Nico!" I yelled in the direction of my ever-prone child as I took the stairs 2 at a time. I tore into my bedroom, ripped off my jeans and T-shirt, and was about to don my London clobber when I realized I couldn't possibly, and hopped in the shower to hose myself down. Avoiding the hair and face, but inevitably caught disastrous sprinkles. I hopped out, dried myself hastily, and had just got my underwear and skirt on when Nico finally appeared. "What?" "I'll give you £20 if you'll hose Nutty down, feed him, and tip him out in the paddock." His eyes popped. 20 quid? "Geez, he must be hot if you're flinging 20-quid notes around," he muttered. I swung about. "What did you say?" "Nothing." He disappeared, trousering the cash. Minutes later, as I turned my car smartly round in the yard, aiming now for the 22 minutes past, I saw him lead Nutty out. He tied him up and picked up the hose. I gave him a cheery wave and yelled the usual stuff about keeping an eye on the sheep and the chickens and the dogs, and then I was off. But as I plastered on a smile, he gave me a very old-fashioned look, and I had a horrible feeling he was about to say, "Just watch yourself, Mum," as Lucy had done, so I shot off through the gates before he could. Happily, the lanes were clear. As I was slowing down to approach a junction, I was honked suddenly from behind. I glanced in my rear-view mirror. Wretched Paddy Campbell! All I needed. I stopped and stuck my head out of the window and glared back at him. "What?" "Pull over. I want a word." "Flaming cheek." "I haven't got time. I'm catching a train." I realized, to my horror, he was already out of his pickup and striding towards me. Plunging the car into first, I shot off. Seeing his shocked face in the rearview mirror, I grinned. Arrogant idiot. I drove on. Some minutes later, I rounded a bend and came to another junction, but there was Paddy's red Jeep right in front of me, sideways on, blocking the road. Weasel. I screeched to a halt. He'd taken the shortcut through Jim Baker's farmyard. Paddy was standing waiting in the lane. Livid, I leapt from my car and I strode up to him. "Get out of my way, Paddy. I've got a train to catch." "Not until I've had a word with you first. What do you mean by putting up the price of your land?" "I'm putting it up to the market value. I'm not giving it away. I'd be mad to do that. I'm getting what's fair." "You know very well I'm the only one who's going to buy it. Who else would want 80 acres in the middle of nowhere without a house attached?" "The Foxes might." "My other elderly neighbours." "I've already asked, as apparently you have too, and they don't. You're just forcing my hand way above what's fair." "I'll tell you what's fair. You getting out of my way and letting me through and talking about this some other time." Some other time that suits you, I imagine.
Yes, Paddy, that's right. My land, my rules. And if I were you, I'd be a little more obsequious.
Oh, I'd like to.
What?
We were facing each other now, inches apart in the middle of the road, glaring fiercely.
What would you like to do? Put me over your knee and spank me, or something?
Like you'd like to do to my children? I have absolutely no idea where that came from. It had appeared in my head from space, and employing no filter whatsoever, I'd said it. Paddy blanched, taken aback. Then in his eyes I saw something arrive in his head too, and just as impulsively he acted on it. In the middle of the lane, in the middle of nowhere, he took me forcefully in his arms and kissed me, very thoroughly, on the lips. Don't ask me why I didn't pull away immediately. I mean, perhaps I was too shocked. In fact, if I'm being totally truthful, we parted at exactly the same moment, when a car horn sounded abruptly behind us. Appalled, we pulled apart, like deflecting magnets. Paddy's eyes were still full of something extraordinary. But when he glanced over my head at the car, whose path we were blocking, they instantly became guarded. Without giving me another look, he turned on his heel and strode to the cab of his truck. I turned and looked, just as Mr. McCarthy from the village stuck his head out of his car window. A huge grin split his desiccated, weather-beaten old face. "That's nice, love. I didn't know you and the veterinarian were like that." I froze, my hand on my door handle. Then I hurried over, bent down to his open window. No, we're not. Not remotely. In fact, I don't even like him." He looked taken aback. "Right you are, love. None of my business, I'm sure."
"And he doesn't like me either. He really doesn't."
He gazed at me astonished. Then he threw back his grizzled old head and roared with laughter, revealing an unusual dental arrangement. "Does he not? Is that so? Don't worry, love. Your secret's safe with me."
"Oh, I do hope so, Mr. McCarthy. I sincerely hope so, because there's absolutely nothing in it, okay? Nothing whatsoever."
At least it had been Mr. McCarthy and not Mrs., I thought. She was a dreadful gossip. Mr., I felt sure, would be as good as his word and keep it to himself. Men did that, didn't they? But it wasn't ideal in a small place like this.
What had he been thinking, Paddy, to kiss me like that? So, roughly?
No, that was wrong. I swallowed. Rudely? Yes, that's what he'd been. Plain rude. After a bit, I touched my lips. My fingertips stayed there for a moment. It was odd, though. I felt rather extraordinary. Well, of course, who wouldn't? I was bound to feel peculiar. Not excited, which I'd been about to say. More, dislocated. Because, let's face it, I hadn't been kissed for 5 years, and certainly not like that. Ever, really, like that. Well, perhaps Henri. Yes, definitely Henri. I felt my mind crouch, ready to spring to Paris with effortless propulsion. But I halted it immediately in its tracks. Oh, yes, I knew how to do that. Knew which buttons to press. Once on the train, the next one again, of course, the 48, and by now horribly late, I took out my phone and read a text. "Sorry about that. Can't think what came over me. Thought you needed teaching a lesson, I suppose. It meant nothing. Paddy."
Fury raged. I texted back, "You were totally out of order, and I'm appalled. I hope you're thoroughly ashamed of yourself. Too right it meant nothing."
Stupid of me to imagine you could read. Can't help noticing my initial text contained the word sorry. Are you one of those people who likes to milk an apology?
I'm one of those people who knows a genuine apology when I see one, and yours had all the sincerity of a rat in a trap. Having trouble with rat analogy tends to apply to a person of dubious moral integrity with a propensity to double-cross. Anyone spring to mind? Are you calling me a rat? Your word, not mine. This is childish, and I have a calf to deliver. Oh, suddenly it's childish, and you have a calf to deliver. Aren't you the big grown-up man with an important job? No response, which was annoying because I wanted him to be the last, not me, and then I'd ignore him. But now he was ignoring me. I pocketed it, wishing my final text had been a trifle more dignified. Lucy and Minna were getting ready to go out when I arrived at the flat, and I have to say Minna looked fantastic. Darling, I dropped my bags in the middle of the room. You look amazing. You've lost weight. She had. Minna wasn't fat, but she could run to a tummy and chunky thighs if she wasn't careful. Thanks, Mum. I haven't eaten at all since I got here, just drunk loads, and I've had so much fun. I wasn't sure I should condone such an admission, but her smiling face told me to let it go, and I wondered if drinking vodka and dancing for several nights on the trot would do the same for me. I've got to hurry, or I'm going to be late. Obviously, I'm going to need a key. Leave it under the pot for me. In London? Minna looked shocked. Yes, but don't tell Lucy. We exchanged a guilty, complicit look. Except I'm bound to be later than you, she said, frowning. So why don't you take it? We'll probably end up at a house party. We? She slipped the key from her jeans and I pocketed it gratefully. She coloured. Oh, just this guy I met, friend of Lucy's. Oh, good, darling, good. Easy, mother. I'm going for drinks, not marrying him. And does he have a name? Sadly not. His parents forgot. She gave me a bolshy grin. And yes, I'm still in love with Ted, so don't get any big ideas. Has he been in touch? Yeah, a bit. Her mouth drooped. Why had I asked that? Why? Minna, shall I take my makeup off and start again? She peered, brightening as I knew she would, at being style-counselled. I would, she said firmly. You've obviously been slathering it on and it's gone all goopy. This had me speeding to the bathroom in seconds flat, whipping a towel around my head and washing vigorously. By the time I'd reapplied the works, I was seriously late. Shouting a last goodbye to Minna, I grabbed my handbag and fled. I tottered down the road in heels, hoping, praying for a taxi. For once my prayers were answered, and a black cab rolled right up beside me just as I swung round to look. Where to, love? Felix had been at the restaurant for literally 10 minutes, he assured me, as I hastened to take a seat beside him at the zinc bar of some super cool, buzzing Chelsea restaurant. It only took me 2 attempts to achieve the high bar stool, and he shot out a hand to ensure I didn't tumble off the other side as it spun, but other than that, it was seamless. You look lovely, he told me, resuming his seat, having dismounted to softly kiss my cheek when I'd arrived, which caused an electric current to fizz through me. Only 1 kiss, which I always felt was far more intimate than 2. I took the liberty of ordering some champagne. Is that okay? How lovely. Yes, please. What are we celebrating? Oh, nothing. I just thought. Calm down, Molly. Just calm down. This is how urbane, sophisticated people behave of a Tuesday night in Southwest 3. Do get a grip and try to behave as if you're awash with Bolly at home. You've been to a sushi bar before, which I had a feeling this was. Are you a fan of these fishy crustaceans? Ooh, I love fish. Excellent. I assumed you would be since you didn't demur at my choice of eatery. I've ordered 12.
To my horror, a vast platter of oysters appeared in their shells from beneath the zinc bar in front of us, with a murmured "Bon appétit" from the smouldering garçon. Not a sushi bar at all, an oyster bar. Yuck. I composed myself, and there was a bit of preliminary chat about our respective weeks, his far more exciting than mine, and then I asked about his father, watching mesmerized as he expertly squeezed a dash of lemon, then Tabasco, onto a wobbling, translucent glob and popped it in his mouth. "He's not so good, I'm afraid," he said sadly when he rolled it around enough and swallowed it. "He's back in bed this week. The emphysema's flared up again. Camilla's been a brick, though. She stayed on to look after him." "Oh, poor chap." I tentatively picked up a shell. Only once, in France. Not a huge success. He insists on getting dressed, and she finds him sitting on a chair beside his bed, fully clothed. He's better lying down. It makes him cough to sit up. With a bit of gentle persuasion, she gets him back in his pajamas and into bed again. "Oh, dear." I put my shell down. I can't really pay her, but she says it doesn't matter. "Oh, so sweet." I know Dad adores her. He'll miss her anyway. Hey-ho. He rallied, straightening up on his stool and popping another oyster. "The decorators are coming next week, and I've got grand plans for his new accommodation. I've decided to shift my studio to the top floor and move him downstairs, which will suit him better." Golly, what an upheaval. All those easels, paints. "Oh, it's not too bad. Don't forget I don't do much of that stuff, and to be honest, I don't think it'll be for long." "You mean?" He shrugged. Who knows? The doctors say they're surprised he's still with us." I nodded, thought of him being helped by Camilla from his chair back to his bed. His marital bed, really, of 20-odd years. A hand covered mine. "Molly, I'm absolutely not trying to make you feel guilty in any way. In fact, I was determined not to mention it. It's just you brought it up." Felix's eyes were soft and kind. "It's already arranged. I felt so badly about what I see amounted to an emotional blackmail the last time we met, and I don't want a repeat of that. It's all organized. He's moving in with me in 2 weeks' time." "Right, but no Camilla?" "No, it's too far. You see, she lives in Chiswick. But I'll find someone else. He'll be fine, don't worry." "And you'll have to walk through your aged father's apartment to get to your studio, as will all your clients." I shook my head. "No, Felix, I've got it all organized. I've been thinking about this. In fact, I've already decided. I'm going to use the money from the farm to buy a small flat near Lucy's, and your father can rent the house for as long as he... as long as he needs it." He smiled. "Molly, you have no idea what a rental of a house like that would be. He couldn't possibly." I raised my hand. "I do know. I've been looking into it. And I don't expect a full rent. I'd only ask for a fraction of it. A peppercorn rent. Cuthbert's inheritance is a totally unexpected windfall, as far as I'm concerned. One I'm not even convinced I'm entitled to, if I'm honest. And this would go a long way to making me feel better about it. It would assuage my conscience, and actually I don't want to hear any more about it." And with that I joyfully popped the last remaining oyster, which he was clearly leaving for me, got it as far as my throat, realized it had the consistency of a large blob of phlegm, gagged horrifically twice, eyes boggling, looked desperately for a napkin, and finding none, slipped none too elegantly from my stool and fled to the ladies. When I finally tottered out, white-faced, Felix was hovering, looking concerned. "Golly, what happened?" He escorted me back to the bar. "I thought you were about to puke." No, it just went down the wrong way, that's all." I took a huge glug of cold, refreshing, totally gorgeous champagne, climbed back up onto my stool again, which would insist on revolving. How did people do this? And then sat like a child, still spinning, waiting for whatever came next. Felix was sweet and so grateful in his appreciation. "He'll be beside himself," he said softly, his eyes filling. "Shall we ring him?" I asked gleefully, having drunk most of the bottle of champagne. Was Felix even drinking? He was more of a sipper, I noticed. I must try to cultivate that. "Oh, Molly, I don't know. It casts it in stone, rather, doesn't it?" "Come on, let's cast. The sooner the better." I made him get his phone out, and after a really rather playful and quite sexy charade about him putting it away again and me digging it out. Jacket, not trousers, although I wouldn't have minded. He laughingly agreed and found the number. Felix relayed the news, and his beaming smile told me how much it was appreciated on the other end. For some reason, David sprang to mind as he was grinning, and I couldn't imagine why. It shook me a bit. "Was he up and about?" "Just coming back from the pub," Felix said happily. "He's thrilled." "The pub?" "Oh, he occasionally joins a quiz team down there on a Tuesday, hobbling down with his stick." "Oh," I nodded. Somehow I hadn't imagined him going any farther than the loo. "Someone helped him home, put him back to bed. That old devil. He sneaks out occasionally. Such a worry." "Ah, right." I sank happily back into my champagne. Gosh, these elderly parents. More trouble than children sometimes. The evening rolled on in a delightfully languorous manner. Felix was concerned I hadn't eaten much and ordered some delicious garlic prawns, and then later, after a few more drinks, suggested a club. I didn't argue. The only clubs I ever went to in Herefordshire were for books or bridge, and even those I never managed to get to more than once a month. I climbed eagerly into the taxi Felix hailed outside, assuming Annabelle's or somewhere similar. I was therefore surprised to find myself in a much younger environment. Still in Mayfair, but in a tall white townhouse. Inside it was very dark, supremely sultry, and extremely chic. There was a lot of smoky black glass and subdued lighting, and girls with dresses falling off, and lithe, beautiful men. It was clearly very much private, members only. "Oh, okay." I smoothed down my tired black dress from Coast. "Not sure I'm dressed for this." "You look gorgeous. Come on, through here." Felix led the way through a dimly lit corridor of rooms. Although it was quite hard to see in this light, the clientele appeared to be both expensively and scantily dressed. On a fur rug in a corner, a couple were curled up, talking earnestly, nose to nose. Two very beautiful black men, dressed identically in turquoise Nehru jackets, were holding hands on a sofa, whispering intently to one another, gazing rapturously. Felix led me to a red velvet sofa in possibly the darkest, most secluded corner of the room. We sat and we chatted, and when the waiter passed by, Felix ordered a couple of Cointreaux. He sweetly asked about my family. I couldn't really take my eyes off the room, but I told him about Minna and how I'd been worried and how well she looked now, and he was kind and sympathetic. "She'll learn." "I know." "You have to fall for at least one reprobate in your life. It's the rules." "Exactly." The Cointreau arrived and was sweet and strong, giving me the kick I needed if I wasn't going to feel sleepy with all this soft lighting and music. At one point, Felix took my hand, which I liked very much. The music got louder and thumped with an insistent bass note, which seemed to throb right through me. A husky French chanteuse crooned a love song. Felix whispered something in my ear. Our faces were very close now. Felix put his finger under my chin and turned mine toward him. His eyes flickered with something thrilling. Before I knew it, his lips were on mine and he was kissing me. Properly, and I was kissing him back. And it was sublime. On and on it went. His hands never touched me, just his lips, which somehow was terrifically exciting. I felt like it would never end, and that I might actually pass out before it did. I didn't pass out, though. Instead, I froze as a horribly familiar voice hissed in my ear. "Mum, what are you doing?"